We are all familiar with the concept of belief. Your belief translates into your reality. However, this concept is not limited to the law of attraction or manifestation and all of these abstract concepts. Your belief translates into your reality, not because of all of these concepts aforementioned. However, your beliefs determines how you act. Your actions leads to results. Results determine the ultimate quality of your life. For instance, there was this guy back in college. Because of his physique, he believed he couldn't get a certain kind of girl. And whenever those quality of women will come by, he shuts down, he begins to fidget, or he never approaches them. If you never approach them, you never get them. On a long enough time frame, his beliefs had hardened into fact, not necessarily because he attracted that reality, but he was acting in accordance to that belief system, which made prophecy fulfilling. So beliefs don't just harden into facts as a result of manifestation necessarily. I'm not disputing that fact, but your beliefs leads to action. It's mostly when you act in accordance to those beliefs that it hardens into facts. For instance, over here in Africa, there's so much superstitious beliefs. They still believe in spirits, in demons, and all of these concepts foreigners see as fairy tale. For instance, some people over here still believe in curses. Your father was a drunkard, therefore you too would be a drunkard. And if you believe in that ideology, that is exactly what will happen because you begin to act in accordance with beliefs. My friend, this is a way to be free from curses. Curses need a certain kind of belief system to be manifest. Success determines a certain kind of belief system to be manifest. Imagine that cursed boy converts to Islam. What are the chances of that debilitating prophecy manifesting? There are zero chances of it ever coming to pass because those faith practitioners never drink alcohol. So if you don't drink alcohol, how do you become a drunkard? Another instance, let me adjust my shirt so I look cool. Another instance, this guy believes that he's a failure because every single thing he has done in the past never came to fruition. As a result, he carries around this failure mentality, and whenever he fails, he feeds it back to his mind that he's a failure. He has so failed that whenever he pays for something online and it goes through, he's surprised, he's shocked to the point he relinquishes activity like credit card payments and all of that stuff to someone else because he's terrified at the idea of failure. If you carry a failure mentality, no matter what prayer is prayed on you, you will still fail. One of the reasons failure is an event, not a person, because every single time you attempt something, it's most likely you would fail. Imagine throwing a ball and it enters into the net by some alchemy. You would never try to replicate that result because you and I know it was blind luck. You did it by chance, you didn't prepare for that event, it just happened. Conversely, if you shoot a ball and it doesn't work, you don't beat yourself up, you don't curse yourself, you don't identify as a failure because you know you are not prepared for that event. So there's no using negative words or encouraging negative thoughts in your circumference. I want every single one of you to ask yourself this question. Do I have limiting beliefs? What is holding me down? You can also believe, and this is a very interesting concept. I just came out of the thought of my head, the top of my head. You can believe against what you're doing. As ridiculous as this sounds, majority of you enjoy the process so much that you never want to attain the results. You're so comfortable with the daily trivia, with the daily struggle. You've gotten complacent with struggle such that success is a deterrent to that struggle. Therefore, subconsciously, you don't want success. You don't want the business to work. But consciously, you are firm. You pray for the business to work. However, in your subconscious mind, you don't want the business to work. And what did I teach you about beliefs? You execute actions unconsciously in accordance to that beliefs. And what does action lead to? And what does the next step lead to? And what does the next step lead to? You're listening. What do you believe about yourself? Do you believe that project, that business, that thing you're working on would materialize? Do you truly believe it? Or do you cerebrally agree? Are you dipping your toe, hoping it would work? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. 50 fucking asinine. Beliefs are very important. Now, how are beliefs formed? Beliefs are formed in two ways primarily. Number one is failure, your past failures, rather. Failure equally works because once you fail, it becomes past because you failed. All failures can be classified as past. So past failure could pass. Your past failures, you tried this business, it doesn't work. The chances of you trying again requires half the actual effort and twice the emotional effort. This is the reason most people procrastinate. You don't procrastinate because you're lazy, indisciplined, unmotivated. You procrastinate because of your rubbish reaction to failure. The brain was hardwired to protect you from external problems. So when it sees you're in a bad mood or your interaction with failure isn't from a positive standpoint, it so conditions you to avoid doing the actual work that creates that failure, leading to pain. All of a sudden, you have a big task. The house is dirty. The chef's work becomes alluring. The three dress in the basket becomes due for laundry. The grocery store is alluring. You gravitate towards your friend. You unconsciously wait for texts and phone calls that will distract you from actually taking action. Again, you're not a bad person. It's not your fault. It's not because of something you did. It's as a result of the negative perception of failure. Learn to perceive things differently. One of the keys to becoming a successful individual is to change your perception because it's not the circumstance or the events that hurt us, but how we interpret those events. The interpretation attributed to those circumstances is what does damage. You and I've given this analogy countless times, you and I can look at a flag. One might feel patriotic, the other disgusted. The same object of perception, yet different interaction. If there was an opportunity associated with that object, the other who felt disgusted wouldn't come close enough to identify. So one person gets rich, the other recycles seasons of pain. Perception is very important. Whenever you fail, see it as a learning process. Whatever thing that happens to you on this journey and path to success, convert it to your school fees in the school of life. You don't pay school fees twice unless you're stupid and ignorant. Anybody who fails or makes the same mistake twice is like a dog returning back to its feces, says the Bible. Learn from your mistakes, learn from your failure, evolve and become better. Challenges aren't here to hurt you. Challenges are here to shape you to become the kind of individual who would host the desired outcome. So that was one way that beliefs are formed, failure. The second way beliefs are sustained is through environment. What is the prevailing belief of your environment? For instance, there are people over here in Africa who have this entitled mindset. Once a cousin or a brother becomes wealthy, they feel like they are owed something, although prior never contributing to that success or the life of the individual. When the individual doesn't give as much value as he should because he didn't fucking put any effort, they cry, they curse, they blame, they show pictures, past pictures to their friends. Yes, I am this guy. Now he has forgotten me. Yes, I am this lady. Now she has left us to wither in the trenches. Yet you never show them the significant contribution as touching that young man's success. It's a problem with most people. Also, there is a belief, a limiting belief that God is the sole arbiter of your life. God is the sovereign being. God take everything. You're superior. If you're saying all of those sentences as an act of surrender, it's totally understandable. But if you're speaking from the standpoint of responsibility delegation, then you're out of your mind. Even as powerful as God is, when He comes to the door of your heart, He knocks. He doesn't barge in and say, I'm creator. It's in your own prerogative to either open the door or sit the fuck down. He doesn't force you. So if God doesn't force salvation at the expense of your eternal damnation, why would He impose success on you? If you look at the Bible and you study scripture very well, before Jesus healed anybody, He asked, would thou be made whole? Imagine seeing a man who has been there for 38 years. Remember that guy who was at the pool? Whenever the angels would come to stir the water, he couldn't dive in because he was lame. Jesus asked him a very interesting question. Would thou be made whole again? I mean, it's an obvious answer. Someone has suffered in a condition for 38 years. The only thing you can ask is whether he wants to get out of that condition. Is that what you're saying? I read that thing for quite a long time and it baffled me. Why don't you just heal him? We see this in the same instance with blind Bartimaeus. What do you want me to do that I may receive my sight? The kind of questions they ask, repeated in this same day and age of insanity, you look like a clown. It's like looking at a thirsty man. Do you want water? It seems obvious, but God has given a man the characteristics that distinguish him from other forms of creatures. I hope you know Not all of God's creatures qualifies to be called man. To be called man, you don't just have to stand or be able to repeat words or necessarily have cognitive factors that leads to creativity because animals are creative. Parrots can repeat words muttered back to them. Tigers can stand, gorillas can stand. One of the most distinguishing factor that qualifies you to become man. First, you must sustain the material components as touching that territory. That's something called the law of territories. That's why you can go on air, but you cannot live there indefinitely. You have something called jet lag. You can go to water, but you can't live there indefinitely. Something about that ecosystem wasn't built from your material concept. That's why people who have houses in water periodically live there as touching their safety. The second is the will factor, the will to do it, the will, the will. The will is a very important characteristic of man. The will, the determination, the will to do it is what vetoes anything, either demon, principalities, God, anything. If as an act of my will, glorious destiny, intelligent, charismatic, 6 foot 4, decides to end my life, the only thing God would do would use true people to beg. But if I decide to end my life, I can do it in the next 10 minutes. And the whole NSC corporation would fall. Destinies would die. Scholarships would be cancelled. All as a result of the will of one man. Look at Hitler. As an act of his will, millions of people lost their life. As a result of one man's will, some other people won't be able to live out their assignments. You, as an act of your will, can decide to leave your job. When JFK asked Von Braun, what would it take to put a man on the moon? The will to do it. The will to do it. The will to do it. So every single one of you, whenever you say, I've lost everything, no, you're wrong. You still have the will. You still have the will. You still have the will factor. Once you have the will factor, all hope is not lost. I would arise and go to my father's house. Question. When he arrived and his father gave him a hug through an elaborate party for him, what engendered that process? The will. I will arise. As touching scripture, it was never recorded that God ministered to him or he saw a vision as an act of his will. He could have decided to stay there, but he chose not to. You can decide to be in that situation. You can decide to be poor. You can decide to be beggarly, or you can decide to embrace a life of competence, a life of mastery, a life of beauty and color, a life of hard work, a life of discipline. Do not die like this. There are so many people who has given every single thing they have and they are counting on you to liberate that family. They are looking for a Messiah. Whenever everything is fucked and your parents, your family, they look around, make sure you are that guy who acts as the pillar, holding everything together. The will fired up tonight. The will to do it. So one of the ways you overcome limiting beliefs is by filling yourself with many positive messages, so many positive thoughts. For instance, if I fill a glass with water and try to add something else, it becomes a waste, correct? Of course. So that's something else. Picture is as negativity. Trying to add negativity to the cup makes it overflow. It doesn't enter. To be so filled with positivity such that there's no room for negativity. And negativity is very different from sadness. Negativity is different from failure. Those are negative words you use on yourself. So there are two different concepts, very important concepts I've introduced. Perception, which is very important. It's not the happenings that does damage, but the interpretation ascribed. The second is to fill yourself with positive thoughts. Be so rich with thoughts, and there's no room for negativity. And this is one of the reasons I lasted 2 to 3 years without seeing any material results on my goal or dream. This belief of getting every single day after it, getting up every single day, in spite of the ridicule, in spite of the debilitating circumstance, in spite of the real life problems, but truly believing in your heart and heart of and heart and heart and heart and heart of souls, deep down in the cravings of your soul, that something can happen for you. Believe. Do not end like this. Do not end like this. For the sake of your family, for the sake of people believing in you. Children will die if you give up. Scholarship will be lost. Empires will crumble just because you gave up. Be selfless enough. Watch me and imagine your daughter, imagine your son listening to me through you. Imagine how people are begging. Do not rob this generation of your gifts, of your business, of your products. As always, my friends, it's a pleasure speaking to you. I'll see you when? In the next one.